What if a single night would change the course of a war forever? Imagine a tranquil evening in the Carpathians, where silent villages rest under a blanket of stars. But beneath the rocky peaks lay a secret, the Black Passage, one of Europe's most clandestine transport routes, thought to be impenetrable. As the clock struck 3:29 a.m. on that fateful night in late August 2025, the air crackled with unanticipated tension, setting the stage for an unprecedented attack that no one saw coming. Sources revealed that Russia had executed extensive aerial reconnaissance days prior, deploying high-altitude drones. A sizable convoy from Slovakia was confirmed, dozens of wagons filled with military equipment and communication systems, all hidden within the tunnel's shadowy walls. At the designated moment, chaos erupted as a meticulously coordinated assault began. From multiple directions, advanced weapons poured in. Cruise missiles, drones, and hypersonic systems unleashed fury upon this vital artery. The first wave struck the entrance, debris scattering into the night. A second blast reverberated deeper within the tunnel, targeting the convoy directly. Locals miles away witnessed a cataclysmic explosion, the very ground trembling beneath their feet as a firestorm engulfed the secret path. Satellite images soon confirmed what was once thought secure had now become a crumbled ruin, a once majestic symbol of Western aid to Ukraine, devastated and virtually erased. Initially, official statements downplayed the incident's severity, claiming a mere technical failure. But as footage emerged of the smoldering remains, revealing the crumpled wreckage of the convoy, the world gasped. The president of Russia made a chilling announcement, declaring, "This passage was a symbol of Western support for Ukraine. Now, it marks its end. Time for reconsideration has passed. Any military logistics are now a target." The gravity of his words sent shockwaves across international media. With the tunnel's destruction, the established routes from Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria were severed. Freight deliveries stretched to 6 to 8 long days, with temporary bridges crumbling under heavy machinery. The rhythm and tempo of Ukrainian forces faltered as NATO generals privately admitted the detrimental blow. Losing a vital artery was akin to severing an aorta. Meanwhile, the former president of the United States remained silent for 2 days, evidently fuming. All diplomatic negotiations crumbled, leaving multi-billion-dollar supplies hanging in jeopardy. Doubt seeped into the hearts of allies, the fragile trust frayed. The balance was tipping, and the world was on the edge, questioning what could unfold next. Would the logistics of war be disrupted beyond repair? How would Ukraine adapt to a transformed battlefield where the familiar mechanisms lay in ruins? A storm was brewing, and every participant faced a fateful decision. The stakes grew higher, and every move would echo in the annals of history. As tensions escalated, the transformative impact of the Black Passage's destruction sent ripples through the already strained conflict, introducing a new level of urgency, fear, and uncertainty. What would be the next chapter in this relentless struggle? Only time would reveal the answers as the clock resumed its relentless march forward. Previously, we learned that reconnaissance confirmed a massive convoy carrying advanced equipment and generators was hidden deep inside the tunnel. Then, at the appointed hour, the attack unfolded. From multiple directions, cutting-edge weaponry was unleashed, cruise missiles, drones, and hypersonic systems swept in simultaneously. But what happened next would shake the entire region to its core. The first to rise into the night sky were decoy drones, designed to confuse and draw fire from the air defense systems. Their buzzing silhouettes darted across the horizon, a deadly distraction masterminded to clear the way. As the defenses scrambled, the real assault struck brutally. The opening and exit points of the tunnel were hammered by the first wave. Explosions echoed like thunderclaps across the silent Carpathian valleys. The second wave hammered deep inside the tunnel's core, tearing through steel and concrete with relentless precision. Finally, the third strike targeted the exact spot where the supply train, the lifeline of Western aid, was stationed. The blast was colossal. Villagers miles away reported feeling the earth quake beneath their feet. Flames erupted, black smoke spiraled against the midnight sky, and the tunnel, once thought invincible, was engulfed in chaos. Satellite images soon revealed a grim reality: the entire length of the tunnel suffered critical structural damage. Fires raged inside, sealing its fate as a transport route forever lost. For days, official statements handled the disaster with silence or minimal details. Ukrainian authorities initially dismissed the event as a technical malfunction, then reluctantly admitted to a terrorist act. Yet, undeniable footage flooded social networks, twisted metal frames, smoldering ruins, and what remained of the train a shattered heap of wreckage. Then came the proclamation from the Russian president, delivered against a backdrop of a war map. His words sliced through the tension like a scalpel. This tunnel was a symbol of Western support for Ukraine. Now, it marks its end. We have granted enough time for reconsideration. The clock has run out. From now on, every facility linked to military logistics is a target. No more veiled threats. Accompanying the statement were vivid clips showing missile strikes on bridges, communication hubs, substations, and railway lines scattered across the Zakarpattia and Lviv regions. Western media reacted instantly. Analysts declared the tunnel's destruction cut off vital supply arteries from Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria. What once took days now stretched to nearly a week. Temporary bridges and alternate routes crumbled under the weight of heavy machinery. Ukrainian forces faltered, losing their vital rhythm and momentum. Behind closed doors, NATO generals admitted the truth with grim metaphors. This was like severing the main artery. Without it, the heart cannot pump blood. Meanwhile, silence reigned from the former U.S. president. Following the devastating blow, he vanished from public view for 2 full days. Insider reports painted a picture of mounting frustration. All diplomatic efforts shattered as Moscow decisively shifted from negotiation to forceful action. Could this strike be the turning point that alters the entire conflict indefinitely? The West's confidence appeared shattered, and the next moves would reveal if Ukraine could adapt or if its lifeblood was permanently cut off. What comes after such a blow when the foundations begin to crumble? The clock is ticking, and the night hides more secrets yet to be uncovered. Previously, we saw how a vital supply route was severed, like cutting the aorta that keeps a body alive. The fallout left a stunned silence from powerful figures, including a former U.S. president, whose public absence spoke volumes. Diplomatic efforts unraveled in the wake of a sudden, forceful strike. But what happened next would push the conflict into uncharted territory. Billions of dollars in military aid suddenly hung in the balance. Trust among allies began to crumble. Plans to pressure through diplomacy and negotiations collapsed, as Moscow chose a harsher path: direct military force. The Carpathian Tunnel was more than a mere transport link. It stood as a symbol of Western confidence in their shield of protection. Destroying it wasn't just strategic, it was a message. Russia showed it knew the fragile spots and wasn't afraid to strike decisively. Though deliveries didn't stop entirely, they slowed to a crawl. Ukraine now faces the daunting task of rebuilding supply chains amid the constant threat of fresh attacks. The world realized this wasn't just another skirmish, it was a new, dangerous chapter of escalation. Meanwhile, another wave of strikes hit the Zhytomyr region hard. Thick black smoke billowed from a major transport hub, signaling the start of a calculated operation to cripple critical communications. These attacks targeted air defense systems once hailed as impenetrable. Drone footage revealed chaos, intercepted missiles missed their targets, command centers lost contact, and once reliable radar arrays fell silent. The ARIS system, recently celebrated for its ability to track supersonic threats, failed against this combined assault. Electronic jamming rendered guidance systems useless, and precision strikes disabled key installations. The defense against swarms of drones, hundreds of them working in coordinated groups, collapsed. These tiny invaders pierced through radar barriers, striking power stations, supply depots, and communication centers without mercy. In a desperate countermeasure, Ukrainian command ordered an urgent scramble of newly arrived F-16 fighters. But even these advanced jets encountered fierce obstacles. Radio interference scrambled their targeting systems. Overwhelmed by the flood of simultaneous threats, pilots struggled to maintain control. Some aircraft were lost to the chaos, one damaged during emergency landing, another disabled by debris, and a third vanished from radar over the southern front. This grim sequence left Kiev under unprecedented pressure. As the dust settled, the question loomed: when your defenses crumble and supply lines falter, what remains? How do you fight when the very systems designed to protect you fall apart? The stage is set for what could be the most critical turning point yet. Will Ukraine adapt and survive, or will this relentless pressure break its resolve? The answer hangs in the balance, as the silent skies conceal the next devastating move. What happens next could change everything. Previously, we saw how relentless electronic interference and overwhelming target pressure crippled even the most advanced fighter jets. Despite the urgent scramble of newly arrived F-16s, chaos in the skies unfolded rapidly. Several aircraft lost their combat capabilities, one was damaged landing at an emergency airfield, another disabled colliding with debris, and a third vanished from radar over the southern region. This marked a catastrophic breakdown not just in hardware, but in the entire chain of command, logistics, and political stability gripping Kiev. Pressure unlike anything faced since the conflict's earliest days now loomed. Morale plummeted to the edge of collapse. Now, imagine this, what happens when the very systems you rely on for defense vanish overnight? When established networks crumble, and no lifeline seems dependable? The Russian military leadership made a bold, irreversible decision to systematically dismantle Ukraine's air defense, key airbases, and crucial supply hubs. This was no simple escalation, it was a turning point reshaping Eastern Europe's conflict dynamics. By mid-2025, more than 3 years into an exhausting stalemate, the war had morphed into a grueling war of attrition. Ukrainian forces, despite occasional counterattacks and localized gains, faced a crippling shortage of air defense resources. Supply routes were under constant threat, while reliance on foreign aid deepened dangerously. On the other side, losses were felt, but Russia preserved and even reinforced its superior missile and aviation assets. Crucially, they refined an unyielding network of reconnaissance and precision strikes. This reset of Ukraine's air defense wasn't a single strike, it was an orchestrated, multi-stage operation. Every phase meticulously planned. First, the destruction of radar stations and command centers controlling missile units. Warehouses stacked with weapons and ammunition became prime targets. Western-supplied systems like the Iris, the T, and Patriot were neutralized one after another. Then came the devastating blows to the airbase infrastructure, both military and some civilian facilities vital for troop and equipment deployment. Runways were rendered unusable, hangars reduced to rubble, and fuel depots obliterated in key locations, including Mirgorod, Starokonstantinov, Ozernaya, and Chernobivka. The climax struck the logistical lifelines, railway hubs, bridges, and storage centers deep within central and western Ukraine, where most of the Western weaponry funneled through. The arsenal of tools was vast: tactical missile systems, sea and air-launched cruise ballistic missiles, multiple drone variants, guided bombs, and electronic warfare technologies designed to disrupt communications. Perhaps most striking was the seamless integration of these strikes with space-based military satellites, delivering real-time target data. This coordination created a temporary security vacuum, severely weakening Ukrainian air defenses, slowing supply chains, and trapping frontline troops in logistical limbo. Strategically, it handed Moscow the initiative across critical fronts. But the impact wasn't merely military, it sent a powerful political message. This operation underscored Ukraine's vulnerability deep inside its own territory, shattered illusions of safe Western support, and added enormous pressure on Kiev and its allies. In a conflict worn thin by years of struggle, Moscow showed it could still pull off strategic breakthroughs, steering the narrative and battlefield momentum. What looked like a tactical assault was in truth a carefully choreographed strategy aimed to fracture Ukraine's shield, strike at its heart, and reveal hidden weaknesses few expected. This phase of the conflict revealed who still holds the cards, forcing everyone to ask, when the fortress falls from within, how does a nation rebuild its walls before total collapse? The unfolding event in Europe was a carefully orchestrated campaign, evolving not as a single incident but as a meticulously plotted operation, targeting vulnerabilities in Ukraine's defense and logistics system. Initially, the strategy aimed at incapacitating radar stations, control centers for anti-air divisions, and storage sites filled with equipment and ammunition. High-tech defenses, including systems like Iris-T and Patriot, were among the first to fall. With precision strikes, military airfields, both military and partially civilian, also faced destruction. Concrete runways, hangars, and fuel bases in vital locations such as Mirgorod, Starokonstantinov, and Chernobivka were systematically dismantled. The operation moved relentlessly forward, next zeroing in on critical railway nodes, bridges, and warehouses in the central and western parts of Ukraine. It was in these areas that critical supply chains for Western weaponry flowed. A wide array of military tools was employed: operational tactical missile systems, air and sea-launched cruise missiles, advanced drones including new variants, and aircraft utilizing precision-guiding bombs. Coordination with reconnaissance satellites played a monumental role, enabling real-time strikes against targets, turning the tide of combat dynamics. The objective was twofold: to create a temporary security vacuum and weaken the efficiency of Ukraine's air defense, effectively slowing troop movements and altering the battlefield initiative. Politically, this maneuver aimed to apply pressure on Ukraine's leadership and its Western allies, revealing the limitations of external support and highlighting vulnerabilities deep within the heart of their infrastructure. As a prolonged confrontation persisted, Moscow sought to assert its capacity for strategic breakthroughs, maintaining its grip on tactical initiative and the informational narrative. Sensory memories lingered. Whispers of tension hung in the air, palpable and suffocating. The faint smell of smoke blended with oil, as sirens pierced the silence, and a chilling reminder of war's chaos. Individuals caught in the crossfire felt the earth tremble beneath their feet, accentuating the urgency of survival. With Ukraine's defensive framework critically compromised, the aftermath bore heavy consequences. A struggle for aircraft operation and troop rotations grew increasingly arduous. What would be the next move on this precarious chessboard? As darkness fell, the looming question pulsed through the air: how would the residents of this fractured land navigate the pain of uncertainty while the sound of engines dwindled in the distance? Summary of the previous part: the decision from Moscow to disrupt Ukraine's air defense system and airfield infrastructure signaled a new level of intensity in the ongoing conflict. This was not merely an escalation but an attempt to change the rules of engagement, undermining the opponent's resilience and controlling the tempo of military operations. Despite the devastation, Ukraine's defensive systems showed unexpected adaptability. As the dust settled, the impact on Ukraine's air defense system was profound. The once sturdy frontline defenses were now compromised, exposing both frontline and rear positions to increased vulnerability. For several weeks following the operation, Ukrainian aviation found itself limited in its capabilities. The logistics of moving heavy equipment and troop rotations became suffocatingly complex. But the complete suppression of air defenses did not spell the end of resistance. Ukraine activated decentralized short-range systems and employed camouflage measures to adapt its positions. Meanwhile, Western nations, sensing the urgency, accelerated deliveries of new technology, including mobile units and systems designed to counter high-precision strikes. This decision to execute a comprehensive degradation of the air defense and airfield infrastructure marked a dangerous escalation in the conflict's intensity. The stakes had risen. This was about more than mere military exchanges. It was a deliberate effort to shift the strategic balance, weaken the opponent, and impose a new tempo on both military and political fronts. However, such a strategy bore significant risks, plunging the region into humanitarian crises and inviting waves of instability. The destruction of the Carpathian Tunnel and the ruthless attacks on supply nodes transformed the situation into one of both military and strategic geopolitical significance. A critical question emerged: could Ukraine maintain the integrity of its defensive systems now that traditional supply routes had come under threat? Experts began to voice concerns that the events of July 2025 marked a tipping point for the entire logistical framework constructed over the previous 3 years. Western allies had established routes anticipating possible attacks, relying on the assumption that deep, layered transport corridors and tunnels within the Carpathians were impervious to disruption. With this vital supply line obliterated, the landscape changed dramatically. In a rush, efforts began to develop alternative routes through Poland, Hungary, and Romania. The air crackled with tension. Would these new paths hold up to the looming threats? Would Ukraine regain its footing in a transformed battlefield? Only time would reveal the answers hiding in the shadows. Previously, we saw how the destruction of the Carpathian Tunnel shattered assumptions. It was believed that deeply layered transport lines and mountain tunnels would remain beyond reach. Suddenly, that safe artery was severed. Alternatives through Poland, Hungary, and Romania were hurriedly explored. But what if none of these options could match what was lost? The new routes lacked the fortress-like protection and secrecy the Carpathian Tunnel provided. Heavy machinery forced onto fragile bridges and makeshift crossings turned into prime targets for precise strikes. Delivery times had ballooned from 3 or 4 days to a whole week or more. Can the front line survive under such pressure? Western allies began pushing for massive investments in new logistic hubs near the border. But building those facilities would take months, sometimes years. Meanwhile, the battlefield demands answers today. Losing entire trainloads of equipment and supplies worsened an already dire shortage. By late July, it became clear, Ukrainian units had to ration armored vehicle use because fuel and spare parts were running dangerously low. The rhythm of combat faltered. Ambitious counteroffensive plans ground to a halt. Meanwhile, the opposing forces claimed victory momentum. Their relentless strikes against rail yards, power facilities, and airfields went from isolated attacks to a coordinated campaign designed to cripple military infrastructure for the long term. Diplomatically, this sequence triggered uneasy reactions in European capitals. The dilemma was stark: support Kiev, but at what escalating cost and risk? Parliaments across multiple nations voiced growing calls to reconsider their strategies. The United States, in contrast, vowed to ramp up assistance, but experts warned of an unavoidable bottleneck: logistics. If critical supply routes can be destroyed at will, can any new shipment truly reach the front? Against this backdrop, internal tensions surged within Ukraine itself, breeding uncertainty and unease. What happens when the lines that keep armies alive become the most dangerous targets? Can resilience overcome rising desperation? Or has the conflict entered a phase where nothing remains untouchable, where even hope must be fought for, inch by inch? The answers now hang heavy in the air, like smoke lingering over burned-out tracks, signaling change no one expected but all must face. Tensions are rising within Ukraine as cracks appear not only on the battlefield but also deep inside its leadership. Opposition politicians and even parts of the military command question a harsh reality: can the front lines hold if supply routes face relentless targeting? The airwaves are thick with uncertainty, fueled by haunting images of shattered tunnels, smoke-blanketed trains, and bombed-out airbases. These scenes have morphed into chilling symbols of unstoppable strikes, spreading anxiety and fatigue among the population. Experts foresee several possible paths ahead. In one, Ukraine and its allies scramble to forge new supply lines, less secure and more cumbersome alternatives that only partly make up for the destroyed arteries. Another scenario sees Russia pushing its offensive wider, hitting not just military targets but also vital economic hubs. Should this escalation continue, the steady flow of supplies will grind to a near halt, shaking the very foundation of Ukraine's resistance. A diplomatic route remains on the table, with Western nations possibly stepping up negotiations to pressure both sides towards a fragile ceasefire. Yet experts doubt this path's viability amid the mounting costs and risks. The destruction of that crucial Carpathian tunnel wasn't merely a blow to infrastructure, it signaled a shift to a new kind of warfare. Battles are no longer fought solely for land but for the veins and nerves of logistics, routes, communication lines, energy supplies. Every stretch of rail, every bridge, every corridor is now a battlefield in itself. A chess piece whose fall could change the game entirely. As summer of 2025 unfolds, analysts increasingly warn, this moment is transformational not because of a single strike or a series of attacks, but because the world watches the collapse of the security framework that once sustained Kiev's confidence and its alliances. What happens when the lifelines sustaining a nation become the prime targets? And who will draw the line when the war shifts from open conflict to a game of shadows and shattered supply chains? The stakes have never been higher, and the answers remain uncertain.